Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about real-time versus turn-based combat. If, like me, you think I've addressed this before, I haven't really. I thought I did. This question has been asked a lot by different people for, I want to say a few months, but I think it's been a few years. And it was most recently asked by Credonista7768, who said, if you can't, can you do a video why, as a designer, you may go with real-time with pause versus turn-based? I'm going to talk about real-time versus turn-based combat and then treat real-time with pause as a sub-category of real-time, because what it really is there for to solve some problems with real-time, the same way that you could do something to solve problems with turn-based, all of which I'll get into. Turns out the reason I thought I've done this is I have 3 different videos that talk a little obliquely and sometimes more directly about what I'm going to go over here. There's an Arcanum, real-time versus turn-based, which kind of talks about these issues, but it's specifically for the implementation of what's in Arcanum and how that worked there. I also have a first-person versus third-person video, why you might go first-person versus isometric, and I talk about real-time versus turn-based there. And also, if you make a game where the player controls one person solo versus a party, why you might want to go real-time versus turn-based there. All 3 of those videos are linked below. In some of the things I want to talk about below, I go into far more detail in one of those 3 videos. So if I say something and you're like, oh wait, what about this? I might answer it in one of those other videos. I will try to do it here so they're all together, but I think those other 3 videos provide way more context. Anyway, so let's talk about this. I'll start talking about this in terms of pros and cons of real-time, because that reflects really well what the pros and cons are of turn-based combat. So let's start with real-time pros. First of all, real-time combat in a game is just fast-paced, and a lot of people just like that better. They think turn-based is too slow. They hate when they're just sitting there waiting while the enemies all take their turns and like, why am I here? Now, there are ways to ameliorate that, of course. You can have enemies animate faster on their turn, or just teleport to their destinations, or you can have them all the enemies can take one turn, or have one initiative and still go sequentially, but all go in one big turn sequentially, or maybe they all go simultaneously in one turn. So there's ways of ameliorating it, but people still prefer real-time for other reasons, such as real-time combat allows for player reaction. Like, let's say you're putting in a block or a dodge. You see an enemy attacking you, you block or you dodge. It's player reaction, not player character reaction. So some people like that better. It also allows for timers to be used, because we're talking about real time here. So you get a buff put on you and you have 10 seconds to do something, or an explosion is going to go off in 10 seconds. You have 10 seconds to get out of the radius. Those things can be used as opposed to turn counters. The equivalent things would be you have a buff that's going to last for the next 3 turns, or that explosion is going to go off in 3 turns. So they sound the same, but they're really not, because in real time, if there are multiple ones happening at once, you may be forced to go, is there a radius that I can get out of those 2 explosions? And that one's going off in 5 seconds, that one's going off in 10. I need to figure it out right now. Where turn-based, it's your turn. You're like, that one goes off in 2 turns. That one goes off in 3. I think I'll just walk down here. So it's different things, different effects you want on the player, or how do you want the player to react. Another advantage of real-time is that offensive and defensive abilities are used at the same time. The player may swing and hit someone and then block an incoming shot. Where in turn-based, when it's my turn, I'm swinging to hit them. They're not doing anything. And then when it's my turn, or when it's the enemy's turn and they hit me, my character may have a block skill and use it automatically. So they're not being used on the same turn. Real time is really great if you have large groups, whether it's a lot of player controlled characters, like you have a party, or whether it's a lot of enemies. If you have real time, combat tends to last way less time. Even if you say a turn is this many seconds, it's still probably going to go a lot faster if you go real time. So people spend less actual game time in combat than they would in turn-based. And finally, real time for those and a lot of other reasons is really good to use for first person. It's harder to do turn based in first person because either the camera has to be rotatable from who you're looking at so you can see the other thing you're moving, or maybe the camera jumps from person to person. It's hard to get a good idea of the battlefield unless you can change the camera to isometric temporarily. So first person is just, it kind of like goes, yeah, let's do real time. But now let's talk about real time cons. It's very hard to control a large player group in real time. This is often solved by adding pause. So you have real time with pause, which is a subcategory of real time. And then it's like, well, I will issue orders on my guys and then turn off real time. And your little guys run around and do stuff. Okay, it's not really quite the same as controlling each of them by yourself. Other ways other games have solved it is there are AI settings you can put on your party members, and then you know how they will behave when you're not directly controlling them. Like, you know, if someone drops below 50%, your cleric's going to cast a heal spell. It's way different than you doing it, but at least it'll happen. Another issue I see, and this is a personal one, but I'm sure a lot of you share it, is I frequently see rules designed for turn-based being used in real-time games with no change. I'm on record as saying this annoyed the out of me in Baldur's Gate, not 3, the original one. Fireball. I'd cast a fireball, and while my character was casting it on the designated target area, the enemy I really wanted to hit moved out, and maybe because one of my other characters, was attacking him, he accidentally moved in to the target area. That happened frequently. It annoyed me. It's why I use things like Magic Missile, where you go, I'm going to cast it and attack that guy, that guy, that guy. And even if they move, the missiles curve in and still hit them. Fireball can work in real time. And if you accept that as a limitation, that's maybe kind of like you can make Fireball really powerful because of that limitation where you may not hit exactly who you want to. I just find it way less useful in turn-based. And I also find it weird when a game like D&D, which is designed to be turn-based, is translated into a medium and made real-time. And one time when I asked someone, well, why should we be making this in real time? It's like, well, you're changing medium. And I'm like, true, but all of these rules are designed for turn-based. Basically, you're setting yourself up for a lot of work if you want to take a turn-based game and say, I want it to be real-time now, because of all the things I'm talking about here. One big issue with real time is it means for any particular character out there on the screen, it relies way more on your player's skill than that character's skill. The thing I talked about with dodge, if in real time you may have to press a button to dodge, and maybe your dodge skill, or I'm doing a block, maybe your block skill determines how much of the attack is negated, but you still have to press that button at the right time. For turn-based, maybe your character just automatically blocks when it's the enemy attacking, because otherwise your character's just standing there. And if maybe he has to have action points left over, maybe he doesn't. So people have argued that the real-time game increases player agency because it increases the use of player skill. But that's not how I like to think of player agency. I like player agency to be deciding whether to do something, not how good the character is. Because then you're starting to turn into an action RPG, which may be what you want, but I prefer games that are more non-action RPGs. The character's skill determines how good they are at dodging, not the player's skill. Finally, this means that real-time can be far less tactical than turn-based. It still is tactical. You still have to decide what you're doing, or maybe your other party members are doing. But turn-based suddenly has a lot more tactically strategy involved in positioning where your characters are going, noticing the position of enemies, predicting what things might be happening, as opposed to real time where everything's just moving at once and going around, and prediction is more chaotic and positioning is way less reliable. So that makes it far less tactical. It still is tactical, it's just less tactical. So, both sides, real-time and turn-based, they have their loud vocal advocates to the point where some people will only play real-time games, and some people will only play turn-based games. So don't think you're going to pick one of these and like, I have solved the issue. There will be a group that goes, oh, I won't play your game because you picked this combat. And if you think you want to put both of them in, you probably want to watch my Arcanum real-time and turn-based video. I think Pillars is doing it much better, but they're also spending a lot longer trying to get it to work. It's hard to make both of them work in the same game. Similarly, I've kind of already addressed it, but both sides, real-time and turn-based, have solutions to issues. Although solution is the wrong word. It's more like they recognize that there's a problem and then they ameliorate it somehow. Pause is a perfect example of that. Real-time with pause is just an amelioration. It addresses the problem that real-time has with trying to control a lot of things and at once, and a human just can't control 6 people simultaneously. It doesn't solve all the problem because, as I mentioned, if you have an AoE spell, once you unpause and that spell goes off, things may move in and out of that area effect. So it addresses some, but not all of the problems. Turn-based has the same issue. You may think turn-based is really slow, and I talked about, well, enemies can now share initiative, meaning all the player characters go in their own separate turns, and then all the enemies go in their separate turns. But you can also speed it up even faster by all the players go in separate turns as the player controls each one, and then all the enemies go at the same time. Them going at the same time will really speed up the game, but it does make it slightly different because if your game contains rules such as engagement, so if it matters if there's 2 people next to the player versus 2 enemies next to the player versus just 1, if these 2 enemies can take the same turn, then both of them can hit you while you're engaged. Where if they had to take individual turns, this one would move over, hit you without you being engaged, and then this one will move over, and now you're engaged. So the second one gets an advantage, the first one doesn't. Again, it doesn't solve everything depending on how you speed up turn-based, but then it allows you to do some player reaction skills because you can say, okay, any AP points left over, like I mentioned, my player characters, or the enemies too, can spend some of those to dodge or block. But you're still left with that. It's not, you don't have to press a button to do it. It's automatic. So it may not go back to that player agency part of the player skill that you want, that I often don't. So as usual, this boils down to what you want depends on your design, which is why I always say design your game. Come up with your setting, come up with your story, and then start doing your mechanics. And if you decide you want it to be a first-person RPG, you almost certainly want it to be real-time. But if you want to do an old-school party-based isometric RPG, you probably want to be turn-based, or at the very minimum, real-time with pause. It depends on which of those, solutions ameliorates the problems you dislike the most and leaves problems that you don't really care about. So, I hope Credonistus7768 and many other people that this answers your questions about real-time versus turn-based.